Hello, it's 3:52 p.m. on December 4th, 2012. This is a new WuJo. I'm going to talk about chakras today. There are these, the chakra means wheel in Sanskrit. It can also be an implication of turning or motion. So it has a certain amount of duality built into the word itself, unlike every other Sanskrit word, which has bazillions of different meanings. But chakras are, in the context I'm going to speak of, are not wheels on a wagon. They are literally the wheels that allow the energy of consciousness to come through the immaterial boundary into our bodies and get us motivated, literally give us the ability for action and movement. This is going to be a little complicated, I'm afraid, so we'll have to start back up a bit. There are 22 trillion times a second, there's this pulse from the center of the universe that goes to the center of every galaxy outside of time and space, so it happens instantaneously. From within each galaxy, from that middle, it goes out instantaneously to all the solar systems and all the extrasolar system material in that galaxy, again, outside of time and space, and it happens instantaneously. These 22 trillion times a second pulses are interspersed with 22 trillion times a second pauses. In the pulse, everything in the universe is created. Like a flashbulb lights up and we see ourselves and all universe around us. If we could see it 22 trillion times a second, this is the effect that would occur. If your mind could capture that, it would be very much like you were living in a strobe that was flashing at 22 trillion times a second. And every time it was not flashing, you were in total instant darkness. Probably, in our case, we would have some memory of the light because we have this thing called persistence of vision, which you will note if you were to stare at a candle for a second and then blow the candle out or turn the light off after staring at it, you'll see the persistence of vision maintains itself within your visual cortex as though the object is still there in sort of a hazy fashion. But so, now imagine this, the 22 trillion times a second strobe that creates reality. Every one of those 22 trillion times, reality is flashed into instant hardness and exists. And then the pause comes along and it doesn't exist. In the space that it doesn't exist, things change. It's not like stuff doesn't happen, even though that is called the void by both Taoist and Buddhist and the Hindu religions, and they understand the nature of the void. The void is not absent of things because the void is capable of supporting consciousness or intent. And so it's kind of like we flash into hardness and then we flash back into consciousness 22 trillion times a second. Now, our brains are really stupid and our senses are really limited. And so we only think at about, if we're really lucky, we could see it like 60 or so frames a second. A minute, excuse me. One flash per second. And we know that we can be tricked into thinking that still motion pictures flashed repeatedly look like movement to our minds. Part of this is that persistence of human vision I was talking about. We see the image between the images. We see it almost morph because of the way that our eyes work with our brains. And this is actually what keeps us usually from being killed by rhinos and, errant buses and that kind of thing. We're able to perceive where it's going to go in between these flashes of actual reality occurring. So at that level, the 22 trillion times a second, we have motion in between, in the sense that when everything is not flash frozen with these flashes of light coming into existence, in the pauses in the void, the intent shifts and consciousness rearranges itself, and the next flash you get a slightly different picture. And so for us, at our limited level of thinking, at the 60 frames a minute, we get the sort of jerky impression of motion, but it's good enough for us as we go along. Now, things are not really as we perceive them because our senses are so limited and our brains are a little dumb. So we see ourselves in the mirror, but we're not actually looking at ourselves. We're looking at an after image that existed the last time our mind was able to capture an aggregation of those 22 trillion times a second flashes into hardness. Our bodies are temporarily, during that brief period of consciousness looking at itself in a mirror, say, and you see yourself standing there, for the period of time that that's actually going on and registering in your mind, that may be several 22 trillion times a second or several even milliseconds beyond the actual movement of reality. So reality is moved on from that point. In other words, by the time you're perceiving it, time has passed. It's gone. There's that brief boundary line of the now, and then everything else is past, and your perception allows you to have the illusion of the perception of the future. As part of all of this weirdness as to how reality actually works, your body is not what you think it is. It's not solid atoms. There's no really solidity around you. This illusion of your body is fabricated for you by the intrusion of energy from the void, if you will, from that part of reality that is consciousness and not materium. And it intrudes into the materium and makes the materium work through basically these vortex points. And usually we find the vortex points all over the planet. This is where the people previous to us planted the big giant tetrahedrons and other shaped pyramids, or built Angkor Wats or Machu Picchus, or this kind of thing. So there are these natural occurring vortexes all over the planet. And we see them in our magnetic fields all around. We see them in every possible thing we can with our augmented senses of technology. In fact, the quanta physics basically is their whole thing is investigating a spin at a non-mainstream media meaning of the word. And their investigation will ultimately lead them to believe that there might be hundreds of trillions of particles, because it's sort of like the mind chasing itself. They will never cease finding new particles if they keep looking for them, because they keep creating them as they look for them. They don't really exist the way that these people think. So CERN is really a huge waste of money if that was its intent, which I kind of doubt. In any event, as an aside, now let's go back to the idea of the whole spin of the chakras. So your body, as it is existent during these hard periods of the reality flashing into existence 22 trillion times a second, has to be energized within the materium in order to make the molecules and everything shift themselves ever so slightly so that you can have this perception of movement. And that's how movement works within the materium. We just very much like the old style of claymation, or the way that they used to do animation. I once did an animation when I was a kid of a couple of cartoon characters cut out of paper, and I'd shift them and take a photo, shift them and take a photo, and so on. And it worked very well. It was a nice little animation technique. And that's fundamentally how all of reality works, only, of course, it's working really damn fast. And so we'll never perceive it. But as part of that, working really fast, we have the idea that energy must intrude in the materium in order for our hearts to beat, lungs to breathe, blood to flow, water to flow, gravity to exist, light to exist. So the universe, when they say go into the light and all of that, that's kind of bogus. Light only exists in the materium. It doesn't exist in the void. You'll never encounter that kind of a choice, believe me. Excuse me. It's been a rough few days with Kathy in the hospital. And this is late in the afternoon for one of these in any event. But I wanted to get it out while I was still thinking about it. So the energy has to come in from the consciousness part of reality. And we can think of consciousness and materium as two halves of duality, because it makes sense in a way to think of them that way for this discussion of our experience as being humans. And for all the non-humans, because I'm sure this also applies to them, if any of them are listening. The boundary layer between consciousness and the materium is itself the very edge at which material reality exists. So that's continually around every atom, and not really, 5 miles that way and 6 miles up in the sky. It's not that kind of a boundary layer. It's a boundary layer that exists everywhere continuously in all things. Within those boundary layers, we get the ionic conversion of energy, because that's the first thing that can exist is ions. And actually, that was the way that I derived the 22 trillion times a second, was based on the number of hydrogen in an ionic state and how many of these hydrogen ions could occur in a given volume of space and at temperature and pressure. And that was, then I took it up 3.5 times that in order to get the blink rate, so to speak, that was necessary for the creation at a interconnecting level of crossing lines of the pulse. And then that's 1 order of magnitude, and that's how you get 22 trillion, more or less. It doesn't really matter. We could say it's 80 trillion. The number is just for monkey mind. But basically, there's a lot of them. Anyway, so the energy has to come across this boundary layer, and it comes into every atom, and it comes into our bodies. Now, this is where we start concentrating on the chakra approach to this. We have chakras, or wheels. The reason that we're calling them wheels is because these energy centers, where the energy crosses the materium to immaterium boundary, consciousness to solidity, if you will, they give these the chakras a spin as the energy comes in. So, from our viewpoint, the human body is actually we look at it as these sort of solid, mostly, or bags of mostly water that are stumbling around in a pretty good fashion on our bipedal locomotion. Not really very stable, but extremely wickedly good if you've got the computer control for them. Much better than quadrupeds and so on, because they can't really climb except in rare instances, bears and such. But in any event, our bodies are not really that way. Our bodies are really an intertwined set of chakras or wheels, energy wheels that transport the energy in from the consciousness into the materium that allows our body to exist. So if we think of ourselves as holograms, I'm not suggesting we are, because a hologram is very crude compared to what I'm describing, but if we just for a moment thought of ourselves that way, the chakras would be the little light balls that would be spinning really fast to throw off and build up that part of our bodies, if you will, so that the hologram could exist. And we'd have 7 of them, and these 7 chakras would begin at the base of the spine and go to the top of the spine, and they would be basically able to be clumped into three sort of groups. And the 3 sort of groups would be the lower group, which is the base of the spine up to the spleen. And then there would be a middle group, which is and that would have 3 of these chakras, which I'll get to those in a minute. The middle group is from the heart through the throat. And then the top group is actually, from our viewpoint, would appear to be from the middle of the forehead and the very top of the forehead, or very top of the head. And if we could see the chakras, see ourselves that way, and sort of use some green screen approach and extract the fleshy bag of water around the chakras. And it's really cool that it's water, by the way, because water is related to the hydrogen ion and comes into existence because of the hydrogen ion, and the hydrogen ion is what carries our thoughts. So it all makes sense that we're basically bags of water, and really I would wonder about life that was more dense and dehydrated in terms of its appreciation and understanding and experience of consciousness, as an aside. Nonetheless, though, so if we extracted all of that, if we took away all the bag of water and were able to just see the chakras, we would look like a bunch of intertwined morning glories more than anything. These morning glories there'd be 7 of them, as described here basically in these 3 groups. And the 7 would, each of them individually would look as though the slightly dimpled, multi-petaled, multi-fused petal of a morning glory. And instead of having green leaves or whatever, the morning glory in our case would run back to what we would think of or could examine as a nerve. It's sort of a conduit, a channel, as it channels the energy and crosses the boundary and puts it into our bodies. But if we're extracting the body part and just looking at the chakra part, these would look very much like, say, the roots of the morning glory flower, absent any of the plant part. We wouldn't see any vegetation. So it'd just be a weird kind of thing. And all these multi-fingered, many digital output from each root synapse, so to speak, would all intertwine to form a network of all of these things touching each other from the Muladhara, the very bottom chakra, all the way to the top one. And that would really basically be the energy transfer from consciousness into the material world. So, the chakras are actually very important in a number of ways. As you will note, anybody who's ever fallen and hit their coccyx on anything knows the excruciating pain that occurs from that. And if one examines that and looks at it, you'll note that that's because the coccyx is part of the sacrum, which is a very interesting bone. It is basically one, but it looks to be fused, prehensile tail, all of that business. Very much like the sartorial sutures on your skull fuse as you grow older. It allows your brain to grow and so on, and until you get to a certain age, your skull could be considered to be soft. That's also true of the sacrum as you grow. And at some point it starts all fusing together, and there's also all kinds of associated diseases from stuff not working correctly. But let's just look at it from the viewpoint of you've just fallen on it, and it hurts like bloody hell. Well, one of the reasons that it hurts is because there is indeed the coccygeal spinal ganglia down there at the very end, which is the lowest nub of nerves you've really got in your spine. And these nerves are really rather spectacular because they come out in huge bundles through these holes in the sacrum, which is triangular shaped, by the way, tetrahedral more than anything. And always curved, and these things, the lower ganglia there, the coccygeal spinal ganglion, is just a little south of all of those nerves that come from the genital area that then join into the spine and rush on up in the spinal column to give you all kinds of interesting information from your fiddly bits. So that's a very sensitive area. But in addition to that, the most basic chakra is the one at the base of the spine. So everybody on the planet, the most dullified sheeple on the planet, all the way up to the most enlightened individual that's ever lived, will have the Muladhara chakra spinning, because that's the one that basically is keeps the engine turning over, so to speak. It has fewer petals than any of the others. The petal effect that is created from and the dimpling is created by how the energy comes in from the immaterium part of reality into the material part of reality, and this twisting iridescent effect that occurs. In any event, boy, this gets really complicated. Okay, so that's true of all of the chakras, that they all have this iridescent mother of pearl look when you see them, when you actually can view the things. And if you go and you do Aikido when you work your butt off and you're reasonably young, like when I was in my 40s, and I'd go to these big Aikido teach-ins, so to speak, that would go for 3 and 4 days. And everybody'd get the ki flowing really good. And there would be times when indeed I'd be able to virtually see the chakras of other individuals, and they were always iridescent this way. It's an eerie effect. It's much greater than seeing the auras. It was only occasional. It'd be interesting to see if I could do it now. It's been a number of years, decades, but because I'm an old fart. But the effect of looking at them is intriguing indeed, and they're always iridescent. They all have their own different color scheme. There's also a video that I saw once. I haven't been able to relocate it. I saw it on YouTube or Vimeo, and it was of the great Ganges festival in India a number of years back. I think it's this one coming up in February. It was so it would have been like maybe 97, 98, something like that, maybe in the early 2000s. A guy with a video camera was walking through the festival at night. There were perhaps 10 or 20,000 people in the same square mile he was in that were all hugely lit up with their ki, but within that group, there were 2 or 3 really enlightened individuals whose chakras were glowing, because we were looking at basically masters of being human who really were well enlightened and knew what the hell was going on. And his video camera picked this up. The interesting part of this, of course, is that this is one of those things like the UFOs, where the guy who was videoing it at the time didn't see it. And it was only later when he had it actually got it up and posted it on YouTube, and he came back and looked at his own video, that he was amazed, because when he was just looking at it with his eyes, he did not see these people as the camera saw them, and the camera saw them basically as this interconnected group of 7 chakras, and there were, I think, 3 or 4 of them this way. The chakras were all glowing, and you couldn't see the human around them. It was really cool. fascinating. I watched that for a bit, and then, of course, this was, like I say, probably, I saw it maybe year 2003 or something, and time progressed, and I lost track of it. If anybody ever runs across it, it'd be interesting seeing the link again. in any event, so the very base chakra connects down in there near the coccygeal spinal ganglia, and then a little ways up we have the next set of chakras. Now these are interesting. I should note that as you go up in the chakras, 1 through 7, the number of petals increases, the complexity increases, the color changes, the nature of what they do for the body changes, and in an observational viewpoint, if you look at individuals, you can literally see basically how enlightened they are by this little gauge. If they're all fired up and all of the chakras are spinning, well, there you go. And so it's 1 through 7, and you could even get a range or a rate if you wanted. Everybody's got 1, so that's your basic line. I don't know if a zombie would have a base sacrum chakra or not, but here's the thing. It is quite true that if you wanted to look at us without the body as these floating chakra all intertwined and so forth, one thing you would notice is that there's an energy connection coming up out of the planet that supports that structure. And so our base Muladhara chakra down at the sacrum is pointed downward at a slight angle, and it is receptive to that would be yin energy, we're yang beings, so it would be earth yin energy from a Taoist viewpoint, and that energy, then that basically is us acting as a conduit for solar energy through the other chakras to connect with that kind of energy there from the earth, the yin energy, to connect with the yang energy from the other chakras that provide the tension or contention that allows, again, for this energy to transmit from the immaterial into the material and thus give us movement, life, etc. So it's basically at that level, it can be seen as opposing fields of magnetism, which of course is a metaphor for the electric universe and all of this anyway. We're no different than anything else, and if you look at us all the way through, your heart beats from the electrical ions, from the hydrogen and the calcium, etc. You have all of these various different electrical processes in your brain, all of which are done fundamentally from an electrical viewpoint with alternating current, opposing current. You don't really have a DC current going on. Otherwise your heart would run continuously and have to be spherical or circular in some fashion. We have an alternating current, and so we have a beat, pause kind of a thing. And this is basically how all of reality works. Of course, its beat pause is at 22 trillion times a second, and we're merely reflecting that at our much lower rate of expression of this in our much grosser form, which all this is really cool. A number of years back, I got to this situation where I thought I had vertigo, ended up getting jabbed with needles at hospitals and having my veins scarred by saline because they thought I had low blood sugar or some damn thing. But none of which was pertinent, because I was had stumbled into a key state, if you will, in which I was able to see my own chakras spinning when I closed my eyes. Very disconcerting. Let me tell you, this destroys your life for about 5 days until you get to this point where you reconcile that this is just always going to occur. Since that point, I've been able to really get into the chakras, and I'm as far as the throat chakra, which is an interesting thing itself because it is angled. Really cool. The other chakras are, the one at the sacrum is angled down, and when you perceive it, it turns very slowly. And as you work your way up from the spleen to the solar plexus, up to the heart, to the throat, in the various different chakras at those points, you just get used to this, or I did anyway. I got used to this particular level of orientation and was rather surprised to find that the throat chakra is at an angle, rather steep one. And so it's very interesting. It's right near the pharyngeal plexus. It's in front of that. That's where the roots of that chakra come on in and join the spinal column. I think they all join near or within the ganglia itself, and perhaps the ganglia, which are these rather amorphous kind of massy things in any event, are basically just like a little electrical sparkly in which the chakra dumps its energy into the physical body, because we are so closely associated. We have the pulmonary plexus and the cardiac plexus right across into the spinal column, just as we've got the sympathetic trunk entering in that same area, and the diaphragm is underneath that with the spleen. And right in that area, we've got the heart chakra, and then slightly below that is this major one, which is the spleen chakra. And that's really important, it turns out. I thought it actually, initially, that it just went straight up the spine. It does not. So you have your first chakra, which is at the lower level, pointed slightly at a downward angle of about 26 degrees. Curious again. That is the one that picks up the yin energy from the planet. And then the next one up is not the solar plexus, but it's in fact the spleen. And then you go back down to the solar plexus, which now makes sense because both of those lines of, I can't think of them at the moment, the meridians, the nadi, go around the neural mass of the stomach area at that point, and that's what allows the transfer of energy there into that neural mass, the same way that the top two chakras allow the transfer of energy through the brain material. And the faster your chakras are spinning, the more opportunity is available to your brain because you've got more energy up there. You'll note that people that we think of as dullards or reduced energy in that regard, intellectually, physically, or whatever, all of these people are at some level having a low chakra state. Now, can it be addressed? Can these be changed? Are people born this way? I don't know. It's beyond my understanding at this point to have any kind of a general case that I could extrapolate from the specifics I'm forced to deal with going through these experiences myself and doing the research. So it may be the case that a lot of the chakra interaction that produces a less than effective interaction with reality, and so less energy, those may be, well, I know that pollution and all this sort of thing affects them at specific levels at a grosser dynamic level within the material world, but there may be even greater effects from the electrosmog and all of that kind of stuff. If that's the case, then we'll know soon enough with the global coastal event and the upcoming heave-ho of 2013, 14, and 15, a lot of the electrosmog and the electrical infrastructure that causes it will go away. And so we'll have an entirely different environment to deal with. And a lot of this may come out at that point to those individuals that go through it well. Excuse me. So, we have the base chakra. We have the next one up, which is the spleen chakra. That is at a very dynamic part of the body. The diaphragm is an assistant to the heart. It's also the, if you will, the controller for the, or controllee of the second brain, which is your, around your intestinal mass, and that's where your ego lives. And you'll know this, for instance, when you get a sudden shock, what happens when your diaphragm and that whole area down there is in a contracted, tense state. And it's because that brain down there has reacted. This is where fear comes from, is from that section of your body. And at that point, it affects your breathing. So one way to get out of a fear state, by the way, is to, because of the diaphragm is really cool. The diaphragm can be controlled both from the mind and from the gut. And so the gut, which is your parasympathetic control system, what you can think of as your master control or autopilot, can be overridden by your brain. So if you find yourself in a fear state, one thing you can always do is breathe it out. And give yourself, if you need to, cleansing breath, which is to just force the air out from as deep as you can, seizing control of the diaphragm again, and then go in for long breaths and lower your breathing down into your abdomen. That forces if you will, it forces your ego and the fear out of the picture, and your brain has taken control. It's a common martial arts technique. You learn it way early, and it forces fear out, and at the same time allows you to energize your body through the increased oxygen, because that's one of the effects of fear. You know, the shock and everything. It's reduced oxygen that starts the whole process off, that starts the panic attacks and so on, because what happens? The diaphragm contracts, you get this contention and contraction around the fear points within the gut, and that leads to this state of reduced oxygen, clouds the brain, affects the whole body, etc., etc. So one way out of that is to learn to breathe through it. It's more difficult for some people than others. maybe if you face a lot of fear, you learn it real quick or you die. So in either case, I don't have to worry so much about it in this event. So we go up to the spleen chakra, which, as I say, is near this really dynamic area, the diaphragm and all of that kind of stuff. And then we pop back down through these two nadi, through these two tunnels, back down to the solar plexus chakra, which is around the ego. And so the ego actually has, in the terms of the second brain down there, has control both of the diaphragmic spleen chakra through the diaphragm. And the spleen, by the way, is a very powerful area simply because of the ganglia that are all clustered there that provide all kinds of neurochemical, which again can be thought of as energy transfer properties to the body itself. So this is where you vent your spleen. This is why we have words all relating to spleen as being the house of the bad emotions and this kind of a deal. Isn't it interesting that, we, at some level within our language, we know all of this is how everything works. Anyway, and then so we go down to the solar plexus chakra, and then we bounce back up to the throat, or to the heart chakra. Now the heart chakra is literally separated from the other sets of chakra by having to go all the way up near the spine before the interconnection occurs. So this is the point actually where you could think of it as the tetrahedrons, as our body of energy is two spinning tetrahedrons in a Merkaba fashion. This is where we have that interconnection, and it actually forms the heart chakra. Forms the not the material center of the body, because that's about a couple of inches below the your navel, and in about an inch or so. That's the hara. That's another associated area with the Muladhara chakra. There's what's called the mud ball or energy center down there, which is very close to your actual center of gravity, or center of torsional dynamic gravity. In any event, so now we're back up to the heart chakra, which instead of leading straight back in with its roots, so to speak, it reaches up in towards the throat chakra, which reaches ever so slightly down before they both send up a big, strong root that reaches to the root from the third eye at the just above the carotid plexus. That's where it is, and it comes on in at the pineal, and then we have the what's the other one? Thyroid? I can't think at the moment. It's been a long day. In any event, the top chakra, the lotus, these centers are very interesting from a number of different viewpoints, and especially in the martial arts viewpoints. You'll note that there's a number of strikes and hits at these various places. When someone tries to hit you, they might try and hit you on the top of the head, or strike you. We've all heard the shot between the eyes, that sort of thing. Again, our language betrays all. So it's very interesting, the effects of the chakras and how that can be used as an energy transfer in such things as physical contention. The point of bringing the idea of the chakras up and going on here for about a half an hour, though, is to suggest that if it is correct that individuals such as myself, basically through no fault of our own, have run into a situation of where, I say, we're able to observe our own chakras spinning, and maybe that was the point of all the meditation to begin with, although it was never really a particular goal of mine. Maybe it's just, an average side effect. However, it might also be a leading edge indicator of this energy level shift that we've got going on. And so it may just be that the energy has shifted, and it's just simply a matter of perception, and some people like myself are able to perceive it this way, and others are seeing it in other ways. Because I know a lot of people now are able to see auras where they had not been able to before. And this kind of freaked out a lot of a couple of the guys that I've been in correspondence with, because they weren't really sure what was going on. And I had to explain to him, well, yeah, you get in a big room, especially with fluorescent lights that are going between 50 and 60 cycles with large groups of people. There can be this entrainment process and a feedback process between the individuals and the lights that actually heightens and pulls their auras up. I don't think it's a good thing, actually. I prefer to train in natural light for a number of reasons, out in the sun if I can. But in any event, in fluorescent lit auditorium and especially like gymnasiums, you'll find that the fluorescent ballast can act as a trigger. It tends to be a sort of a magnet effect, drawing up the aura out of the individuals as they get their ki all flowing up, and we become charged like static electricity rather than like a battery fashion. So it's a little haze all around us as opposed to being stored up inside us. The haze all around us, of course, is an indicator that we have the potential, in an electrical sense, that same word again, to store that energy. And thus, way back to the beginning of these WuJos, my point that meditation is all of the stuff it does for you here in the Materium is really cool, but those are all side effects. Those are all side benefits. The real point of meditation is to learn to store energy for after you die, because if you are able to store this energy, it's coming across from the consciousness side. After you die, you go back to the consciousness side 100%. You wake up from the flashy 22 trillion times a second, and you're back in the non-flashy, non-light world. However, you can take back with you energy. You can't take back your gold. You won't be able to take back your favorite tunes or those nice shoes you got. I can't think of their name that have that red sole on them and stuff. You're not going to be able to take back that fancy boat or the generators or the 22 trillion virgins or whatever the hell they're trying to tell you that you're going to get from that perspective. None of that's going to exist. However, if you are able to take and create and store this energy in the hara, which is the center, the battery of your chakras down there, then when you die, when you pass back over, you have a greater level of freedom of choice in those things that matter in that new environment. And there's sort of this boundary layer that you can think of as the limbo or the bardo, in which that energy can be effectively deployed. So it's kind of like video games, and you find the magic whoozy was it, and you get an extra 10 points or whatever. I don't play games, but I know the concepts involved. And so I'm playing game now, which is reality, so I won't mess around with mind-to-mind kind of contention, which I find to be a lot less meaningful. But again, I understand the concept because, again, it also comes from reality. At a base level, it is quite true. If you store up all of the energy you've been, accumulating, your magic whoozy was, it says you've been going along in life, the video game here, and when you check out, you can take those high score energy tablets with you and do stuff. It is a reward. It is a earned credit, not credits, but it's an earned value that you carry with you into that next environment, and then you can decide how you wish to do things. If you don't do this, if you don't meditate, if you're a sheeple, then you are bound by the wheel of karma in a very clear way that replicates the Buddhist or Jain or Brahmanistic understanding of the wheel of karma. You will have no choice. You'll have to face these particular situations in the bardo with no reserves of energy. You'll have to go along with this shit. You'll probably make bad decisions. You get cast back into another incarnation that won't be necessarily as pleasing as it should be. All of this based on the sticky little bits, the karmans that have accumulated to you from all of the actions that you've done within the Materium. They're the demerits. There's good, bad, and indifferent demerits, but they're demerits nonetheless, and you're better off collecting as few demerits, good, bad, or indifferent, as possible. They're different from the energy. They're like set up by the game itself, and it can be thought of as an outside view, a scoring of how the game thinks you did. Sort of like any of these things on TV where people are scored by other individuals that have raspy attitudes and snotty comments and are snarking at them the whole time. That is very much like reality. Again, as below as above. Because within reality, the karma accumulates to your body and sticks to the little indentations initially within the chakra. And so actually, as you go through multiple lives, you bring these things, the karmans reappear because your chakras are recreated in the next life, and you form your body around those chakras, but the chakras have a unique signal that reattaches your karmans again, so to speak, the next time you incarnate those that come along with you. Some you can shed and all of this kind of thing. different discussion entirely, a different 20 discussions. That's really complex and complicated. In any event, though, to wrap this thing up here, the point of meditation is to build up energy within the hara. The energy comes through from the chakras. If you know the cycle, the process, the breathing, the techniques, if you want to learn it, you can go and read this book called The Huiming Ching, which has been translated by Eva Wong, and I think it's called Enhancing the Energy of Life or Exploring the Energy of Life, something like that. It's been a number of years since I've read it, and I don't have a copy handy, so I couldn't tell you the title exactly, but I know the translator's name, because she's really good. I've read a bunch of her Taoist translations. Eva Wong, W-O-N-G. Anyway, but the Huiming Ching has specific. The whole book in Chinese is like 2 pages, so don't be really disappointed. It's not a very big tome, and it's basically these 2 diagrams that, if you know how to interpret not only the Chinese but the symbology involved with the Chinese, very complex subject here. That's why you need people like Eva to guide you through it, because there's multiple layers involved in what is being told here, such that the non-deserving would be led astray, if you will, as with all of these secret society kind of things. But the Huiming Ching lays it out for you and tells you how to concentrate this energy into your hara. For men, I don't know how it is for women. It is different. This is why the female secret societies have their own set of doctrines and so on. It's not anything I've ever explored. I liked women, but I never thought to get into that level of experience of them. However, at this point, if I'm correct, and part of the transitional energy shift is going to bring more excitatory energy and dynamic energy to everybody's chakras, this may also be part of the symptomatic problems that a lot of the sheeple are going to have, because they'll have no experience for what's going on, for what's happening to them. And they will experience these things very badly, I suspect, because they won't have an alternative view. And maybe I don't know, I'm going to look for validation in the future. Maybe I've seen some indications that mainstream agenda guys are kind of preparing for this and are going to try and lead people down a disease road based on what's going to happen. So I don't know, maybe there was even movies about it, but basically it would be kind of like everybody starts feeling weird. It's merely more energy pouring into their chakras. They don't know this. The government steps in right away and says, hey, are you feeling weird? You feel like this, feel spinny, feel this coming in, feel that happening, and so on. Well, hey, you got this disease. Y'all come over here. You need to be isolated, or whatever their agenda is relative to that. Just something to be advised of. This is the USA government, by the way. Probably also applies to Europe. In any event, so the chakras are really cool. We can go into their use and what they provide you for hours. I'm quite convinced that there's increased energy coming through them, and this may account for the awakening. A lot of people like myself and everybody else, maybe just can't help it. The energy's coming on in, and we just have to see this stuff. And that's, of course, the way it should be. I'm quite sure. Universe unfolds as it should. There's a bunch more I needed to get into. Jeez. Had like 9 pages of notes. But it's going to have to wait. I've got other tasks I've got to attend to. In any event, so the chakras are really important. You can increase their ability to function by understanding what they are and how you look without your body. And as soon as you've got that image in you, then you can understand what the improvements can be made by energetic process control, if you will, such things as yoga and the martial arts. The physical movement of the body alters how the chakras are relative to each other, gives you more flow in some cases, restricts it in others where you want to do certain things. So they're manipulable and a tool. Those who don't understand this are going to probably end up being a victim of the increased energy that's going to be coming in. It may, if you've never done it before, it may be a real good time to explore yoga at a gentle level. If your body's out of shape, look at some of these yoga sitting on your butt on a chair off TV kind of things. Go to Gaiam TV. Jay Widener's got a whole lot of really good stuff there. And, he's got like a Rodney Yee and some of these really cool yoga dudes that really know what they're doing. And you don't have to do it the same way he does to the maximal level and so on. But it may really help you get in tune with what I think we're all going to start experiencing, or that some of us already are. So in any event, thank you much for listening. I've got a bunch more on this subject whenever I can get to them.